So welcome to meeting number 13 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. Pursuant to the orders of reference of Tuesday, March 24th and Saturday, April 11th, the committee is meeting for the purpose of receiving evidence concerning matters related to the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's meeting is taking place entirely by video conference, and the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. As at last meeting, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. In order to facilitate the work of our interpreters and ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. So interpretation in this video conference will work very much like in a regular committee meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. And when I say the bottom of the screen, that's for those using a PC client. People using an iPad or something else, your experience will slightly vary. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. And when you are ready to speak, you can either click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, or you can hold down the space bar while you're speaking. And when you release the bar, your mic will mute itself. I remind everyone that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. Should members need to request the floor outside of their designated time for questions, they should activate their mic and state that they have a point of order. If a member wishes to intervene on a point of order that has been raised by another member, they should use the raise hand function. This will signal to the chair your interest to speak. In order to do so, you should click on participants at the bottom of the screen, and when the list pops up, you will see next to your name that you can click raise hand. When speaking, speak slowly and clearly, and when you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. The use of headsets is strongly encouraged. If you have a microphone on your headset that hangs down, please make sure it's not rubbing on your shirt during your questioning time. Should any technical challenges arise, for example, in relation to interpretation, or if you are accidentally disconnected, please advise the chair or clerk immediately, and the technical team will work to resolve them. Please note that we may need to suspend during these times, as we need to ensure that all members are able to participate fully. Before we get started, can everyone click on the screen in the top right-hand corner if you're on a PC, and ensure that they are on gallery view. With this view, you should be able to see all the participants in a grid view, and it will ensure that all video participants can see one another. During this meeting, we will follow the same rules that usually apply to opening statements and the questioning of witnesses during our regular meetings. Each witness will have 10 minutes for an opening statement, followed by the usual rounds of questions from members. I would now like to welcome our witnesses. So as an individual, we have Dr. Joanne Leo.
Mr. Chair, it's just Matt here. Before we get going, just want to quickly dispense with the motion relating to the business at hand. But before I do, I want to seek clarification from you and the clerk. And I'll just raise one paragraph or a couple sentences here from on page 980 of Boss and Gagnon, where it states, standing committees often need the collaboration, expertise, and knowledge of a variety of individuals to assist them in their studies and investigations, but usually these persons appearing willingly before committees when invited to do so. But situations may arise when an individual does not agree to appear and give evidence. If the committee considers such that this evidence is essential to the study, it has the power to summon such a person to appear, end quote. So just a question for you and the clerk, does this committee have the power to summon witnesses or merely to request?
In general, the committee would have that power. However, we are operating under restricted authorization from the House at this point. At this point, paragraph N of the unanimous consent motion that was passed on Saturday says that in addition to receiving evidence, the committees enumerated in paragraphs L and M of this order while meeting by video conference or teleconference may also consider motions requesting or scheduling specific witnesses, and these motions shall be decided by way of a recorded vote. So in my first thought about this is that issuing a summons does not fit in that category. I would like to take that under advisal, and maybe we could discuss it during the meeting of our subcommittee members tomorrow.
I appreciate that a bit of clarification there. So then this committee essentially does not have all the regular powers and privileges that it would normally have if we're meeting in person. So otherwise, this is a virtual committee, is a poor substitute for the real thing. So in that case, I would like to move the motion that the committee invite Dr. Alward, Canadian advisor to the WHO, to appear before the Standing Committee of Health for 1 hour, no later than May 1st, 2020.
Very well. The motion is in order. We had a discussion. I thought we were going to deal with this sort of thing during the subcommittee meetings, but you have made.
In all due respect, Mr. Chair, that was before Dr. Albert had canceled on the meeting. I think this is unique circumstances and certainly worthy of a vote with committee here whether or not he should come.
Well, as I said, the motion is in order. You can move it. You have moved it. So, is there any discussion on this motion?
Matt, as moved, you're asking him. You're not summoning him at the moment, right?
That's right, Marcus, and with the chair, we just gave the explanation that we can't summon him at this time.
Any other interventions?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's Don Davies here. I'm happy to proceed with the vote. I understand it'll be a recorded vote. If not, I would make that request. But I just want to state for the record that I'm not in agreement that the committee cannot summons based on what you read out. So I understand that's not the motion before us today, but I don't want anything to be taken from our voting on this to be a concession that the committee can't issue summons, because it would be my position that we can do so by the terms of the UC motion.
This is simply a motion, vote on the motion as moved. It has no implications on any other matter. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk.
Pouvez-vous lire la motion, Monsieur le Président?
Monsieur, allez-y.
There you go.
Monsieur Thériault, did you wish to intervene?
Je disais, Monsieur le Président.
I was saying that I wanted the motion reread, also considering the fact that we have witnesses. This discussion could be done in subcommittee.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I didn't get any translation, and I did check. I am on the proper setting, but I didn't hear any translation.
Mr. Thériault had just advised that he thinks this could be done in a subcommittee, given that we have witnesses, and he didn't hear the motion. So I'm going to ask Mr. Généraux to reread the motion, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the committee invite Dr. Alward, Canadian advisor to the WHO, to appear before Standing Committee of Health for 1 hour, no later than May 1st, 2020.
Monsieur Thériault, is that okay with you? Have you heard the motion this time? Are there any more any further interventions on this question? Seeing none, I shall ask the clerk to undertake a voice vote. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The vote is on the motion of Monsieur Généraux. I apologize. I do not have your names in alphabetical order in front of me, so please listen carefully for your name. If you are in favor, say yay. If you are opposed, say nay. Mr. Généraux.
Yay.
Monsieur Thériault.
Oui.
Yay.
Yes.
Mr. Fisher,
Yay.
Madame Jansen,
Yay.
Mr. Kellaway,
Yay.
Mr. Kitchen,
Yes.
Ms. Sidhu,
Yes.
Mr. Weber,
Yes.
Ms. Jasic.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Point of order. Does Mr. Van Bynen get to vote?
Oh, my apologies. Mr. Van Bynen.
Yay.
The motion is carried.
Excuse me.
Hold on, me too. I didn't get to vote, but I vote yes.
Am I subbing in for someone or am
I don't have you as a substitute today, Ms. Block, just as a member attending.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the vote. The motion is carried as said. We shall carry on from where we left off. So carrying on from where we left off. So I'd like to now welcome the witnesses. We have, as an individual, we have Dr. Joanne Liu, who is a physician and former international president of Doctors Without Borders. We have, on behalf of the Canadian Mental Health Association, we have Margaret Eaton, National Chief Executive Officer. And for the Department of Public Works and Government Services, we have Bill Matthews, Deputy Minister, Michael Vandergrift, Associate Deputy Minister, and Ariane Riza, Assistant Deputy Minister for Procurement. So we will start with Dr. Liu. You have 10 minutes for your statement if you wish. Please go ahead, starting now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. So I would like to echo some of what I've written already in the Global Mail about my obsession about avoiding the worst case scenario for Canada in tackling the pandemic of COVID-19. I think that all of us right now are holding our breath and are just hoping that our physical distancing strategy will do the job to flatten the curve. But the reality is right now we've put our healthcare system on pause in order to gear up and prepare for a surge of COVID-19 patients. But the other reality is we are managing a pandemic and as well a shortage dynamic of resources. But my key message for you today, and I would bring after that break down in a few examples, it's to really prepare for the worst case scenario, but very much so to prevent what is preventable. So in terms of healthcare system and healthcare facilities, I feel very, very adamant to really push for dedicated medical facilities or dedicated part of facilities with dedicated staff only for COVID-19 patients. It's proved over and again that swapping staff from COVID positive to COVID negative patient may contribute to more infected patients. It is as well very well, I would say evidence that having people who are wearing in a closed circuit of patient become much better at caring for patient in this closed environment. Meaning that if you have a COVID positive patient, it's going to go through a path that only COVID positive patient would go through. We go to the dedicated places, for example, to get an X-ray, and a COVID negative patient should not cross path with a COVID positive patient. And that's the way, to make sure that our healthcare system doesn't become a vector of the COVID-19. And in additional, I would say secondary gain is it might reduce the number of personal protection equipment that we might need. I would like to bring your attention on few circumstances, special circumstances, and it's about the vulnerable communities. We've heard it made the headline now about the elderly homes, but as well there's shelters, there's as well the First Nation. And for me, it is mandatory to really think about implementing radical shielding strategy, meaning that we are shielding those vulnerable population. It's what we call the reverse isolation. We isolate the sick, but we isolate the vulnerable. But we shouldn't do like we've done in Quebec, doing the double failure of isolating our elder and not giving them the right and adequate care. So we need to make sure that we avoid that. But the other thing that we need to bring in as quickly as possible is to test the patient, the carer, regularly who cares for those vulnerable communities. Because we know there is an increased number of asymptomatic people, and then they become, what we call the super spreader. They are infecting others. So bottom line, we don't want to import COVID-19 in vulnerable communities. We don't want to bring it, in our First Nation. We don't want to bring it, in the elder homes. We don't want to bring it in the shelters. My second point is about the healthcare staff, and I'm pretty sure that people from the mental health committee will bring something, but it's, for me, mandatory. I've seen it in Ebola, but I've seen it in cholera, and I see it now in COVID-19 in my hospital, is we need to protect our healthcare worker, first-line worker, physically and mentally. It's our last line of defense for this pandemic. And so I'm bringing that to your attention, MPs, because I feel, very, very, I would say, destabilized when my boss in my ER telling me, please use PPE wisely. This is nerve-wracking. I do understand, that we have to use carefully our PPE, but if you want us to care for patients, I'm begging you to care for us and protecting us. So it is important. It is important to do everything as well, that we protect you protect us, physically, but as well mentally, that we have hotline, to be able, to discuss what is going on, that we have hotline for ethics committee that's going to help us to take difficult decision on patients who are on ventilator and we might want to remove the ventilator or stop care. We need to have psychological counseling and support all the time. And nobody should be blackmailed for not feeling comfortable to work in a COVID positive environment. Again, knowing the growing, community transmission that is going on, I still think that we need, as soon as we're going to have enough tests, that we should try to test our first line worker regularly because of the asymptomatic carrier. So the last point I would like to make on the general thing, it's about the non-COVID patient. Life goes on even if we have COVID-19. And it would be a disaster, a tragedy, that highly treatable and preventable medical condition become lethal. And now we know that somehow a patient with infarctus is dying at home, or with cerebrovascular accident is staying alone at home with his disease and illness. So it is important right now that we are making sure that we're not creating a second-rate status for non-COVID-19 patients, because life goes on. And so we need to have a plan to relaunch the healthcare system in an incremental way. It is, I would say, really, really important, because you cannot hold a whole healthcare system on hold forever. Otherwise, we're going to start to die of very preventable diseases. And I cannot, as a humanitarian aid worker, I cannot not talk about the more global message, and it's the one about Canada. And where is Canada we stand, in the global response in the world? I know we're tackling what we have here, but we know as well the only way to win over COVID-19 is to win over in every single countries. And so my plea as well for Canada is to find out, how we're going to support the low middle income country to respond to COVID-19, knowing that we're so interconnected, knowing that to make all of us healthier depends to making each of us healthier. And so knowing that the Canadian government have invested 300 million, or at least pledged 300 million on research and development, I would beg you to make sure that there are all the safeguards, that the vaccine, the treatment, or the test that would be developed would be a public good. that Canadians, as much as other people, will have access to those new discovery. It will be affordable and accessible to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Leo. We go now to the Canadian Mental Health Association. Margaret Eaton, National Chief Executive Officer. Please go ahead, Ms. Eaton. 10 minutes, please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and I really appreciate being here. As the National CEO of the Canadian Mental Health Association, I'm honored to be representing the 86 divisions and branches that provide direct services and programs to people with mental health problems and illnesses. Our broad network of over 5,000 staff and 10,000 volunteers provide mental health services and programs to over 1 million Canadians annually. We are present in over 330 communities in each province and the Yukon Territory. And right now, the phones are ringing off the hook at those CMHAs all across the country. So today I want to talk about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on mental health and offer you some solutions. We applaud the federal government for its swift whole-of-government response to this rapidly accelerating pandemic. But we also commend the commitment to provide mental health support to Canadians during these unprecedented times, including the newly announced portal for mental health and substance abuse that has been named Wellness Together Canada. We're very excited to see that be announced today. But now more than ever, we need to ensure our mental health care system is empowered to meet Canadians' needs. We are already seeing signs of a potential eco-pandemic of mental health issues as a result of COVID-19. Just last week, CBC reported on the surge in demand at CMHA Nova Scotia. They typically receive 25 calls per day, but they're now fielding 700 daily requests for mental health support. And these requests come mostly from people without a history of mental illness. Canadians are very worried. They're worried about contracting the disease. They're worried about their family and friends, and they're worried about their jobs and their ability to make ends meet. People with serious mental illness and addiction are particularly vulnerable. Many of CMHA's clients are facing housing instability, and they live in situations where practicing physical distancing and infection control is very challenging. In many communities, the programs, services, and treatments that they rely on have been suspended. They are at serious risk of infection, loneliness, increased symptoms, and relapse. Indigenous peoples are perhaps the most vulnerable of any population in Canada. Many community members live with serious mental health issues as a result of colonization, and they experience the highest youth suicide rates in the country. Older adults have small social networks and limited access to technology, which weakens their opportunities for connection. We're concerned that these issues will only be exacerbated by pandemic conditions. Our healthcare and frontline workers are also at risk for mental health issues, as Dr. Liu so poignantly explained. As you've been hearing, the challenges and pressing needs they're facing on the job every day are triggering fear, anger, and anxiety. The grave consequences of the substantial burden that these workers are carrying is already emerging in China, Italy, and the US. A recent study found that healthcare workers who treated COVID-19 patients in China reported symptoms of depression, anxiety, insomnia, and distress. In Italy, at least 2 nurses on the front lines have died by suicide. Healthcare workers in the US are using the term moral injury to describe their experience of physical and mental exhaustion, fear of infection, inadequate supply of personal protective equipment, and the heartbreak of making very difficult decisions. We're only just beginning to grasp the mental health impacts of COVID-19. And as our experience supporting Albertans follow the Fort McMurray fires revealed, recovery takes time, and sometimes up to 2 years. Research conducted 1 year after the SARS epidemic found increases in psychological distress and post-traumatic stress disorder among patients and clinicians. We won't know the full picture of the impact, but our experience tells us the mental health impacts will be significant. Simply put, Canadians need an immediate and substantial investment in mental health to prevent that echo pandemic of mental health problems. That's why we're supporting Canadians now, and we're already planning for the recovery period ahead. As a pioneer and leader in community mental health since 1918, we're focused on mental health promotion and prevention. We aim to keep people out of the hospital, shoring up the mental health of Canadians before their issues escalate, while supporting those with severe and persistent mental illness to help them live better during and after treatment. Our vast network includes mental health and addictions counselors, therapists, nurse practitioners, peer supporters, and recovery coaches. They're on the ground in the neighborhoods where Canadians live, work, and play. We stand ready to mobilize this network to bring more mental health supports to Canadians who need them most in this time of crisis. We can quickly scale up proven programs in English and French to reach thousands of people. Our cost-effective, evidence-based solutions are designed for children and youth, older adults, Indigenous peoples, and first responders. For all Canadians, we offer a program called Bounce Back. This is a skill-building program based on cognitive behavioral therapy. In BC alone, more than 11,000 people have participated, and 85% said that the program helped them make lasting positive change to reduce anxiety and depression. For frontline workers, we offer peer support through a program called OSI Can and mental health awareness training through Resilient Minds. These two programs are based on professionals helping each other and have provided health and healing to hundreds of frontline workers since their inception. With rapid government investment, we can immediately scale and ensure these proven programs have nationwide reach, including to rural and remote communities. While getting resources to Canadians experiencing mental health problems and illness now in the midst of the pandemic remains our priority, it is also crucial to plan for the future. We are already looking ahead to the national recovery and ways to support people as they transition back to normal life. Our recovery colleges are mental health learning centers that provide education and peer support through courses on well-being. There are recovery colleges in 11 communities in Canada already, with many CMHAs eager to develop their own. The Canadian Mental Health Association's mandate is one of mental health for all. We know that meeting this goal requires meaningful government investment in mental health. Canadians deserve access to publicly funded, evidence-based therapies and to a complement of mental health and social supports. As the mental health impacts of COVID-19 will differ based on each person's economic and social circumstances, we know that good mental health starts with having the basics, such as meaningful employment and adequate housing. And in addition to helping people now, we must also ensure we're prepared for the inevitable demands that are going to be made on the mental health system as a result of the increases in depression, psychological distress, substance abuse, PTSD, and domestic violence that almost always accompany large-scale disasters. As the COVID-19 pandemic has revealed, our economy is completely dependent on the well-being of our population. To restart our economy and secure its lasting recovery, we must ensure that Canadians are healthy enough, both physically and mentally, to return to work and to their daily activities. Canadians know that mental health is just as important as physical health. And as we will underscore during Mental Health Week, which is May 4th to 10th this year, and led by CMHA for nearly 70 years, while 1 in 5 Canadians experience mental illness in a typical year, 5 in 5 Canadians need to protect their mental health. We're truly at a crossroads. While motivation to seek help has never been higher, the mental health sector lacked capacity to meet demand before the pandemic began. We must act now to ensure we are prepared for a surge in mental health problems as a result of COVID-19. Now more than ever, Canada must demonstrate true vision and leadership on mental health. We know Canadians will reach out for help. They're reaching out right now. We're simply asking you to please empower us to reach back. Thank you again for the invitation to speak to you today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Eaton. We go now to the Department of Public Works and Government Services. Mr. Matthews, I believe that would be you to commence. 10 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, and thank you for having myself and my officials here with you today to talk about the role of Public Services and Procurement Canada in government's response to COVID-19. Before I begin, I would like to thank the people behind the scenes that are making this meeting possible, including our language interpreters who continue to do an exceptional job in ensuring that Canadians have the most recent information. With me today, Mr. Chair, as you mentioned, is Michael Vandergrift, the Associate Deputy Minister at PSPC, as well as Ariane Reza, the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Procurement Branch. PSPC is the central purchaser for the Government of Canada and is responsible for procuring goods that will help see us through the COVID-19 pandemic. Specifically, we are helping to equip Canada with personal protective equipment and medical supplies now and in the months ahead. It is no secret that we are operating in a highly competitive global environment, and this comes with challenges. The entire world is scrambling to get the same materials from a finite number of suppliers, many of whom are located in China. This is resulting in a complex and unpredictable supply chain. Add to this border restrictions, and you end up with a highly unstable marketplace where orders don't always materialize into immediate deliveries. I thought I should spend a few minutes, Mr. Chair, talking to you about our procurement strategy, and then I would drift into some updates on specific goods that we are acquiring. So I can tell you that our procurement experts are working day and night, aggressively buying from all available suppliers and distributors here at home and abroad. In support of Canada's frontline health workers, we buy supplies on behalf of the Public Health Agency of Canada, which consolidates requests of province and territories and also maintains our national stockpile. And this procurement activity is over and above what provinces and territories are doing on their own. The strategy we're pursuing, which I mentioned I would share with the committee, I should stress it continues to evolve and be fine-tuned as circumstances change as we are dealing with global marketplaces such as we have never seen. Mr. Chair, I am sure that members are aware of the importance of PPE, personal protective equipment, given the global scale of this crisis and the importance of China from a PPE production standpoint. So we're dealing with a situation where many jurisdictions are competing for scarce supplies. At the same time, industry is trying to scale up to meet the global demand, which means that new players are emerging rapidly. Normally, we would look to produce or procure these types of goods through a Canadian distribution channel, but given the rapidly changing market conditions, a different approach was and is necessary. So our procurement strategy is three-pronged. The first part of our buying was to buy existing inventory where we could, so inventory that was already on the shelves. As you can imagine, given the pandemic, these goods were in short supply, but they were important to obtain while we put in place the second part of our strategy. Part two of the strategy, which is ongoing, was to place large orders to create a steady stream of receipt of goods over a number of months. One of the benefits here is that big orders are more commercially attractive in a competitive marketplace. Ordering collaboratively with provinces and territorial partners allows us to increase the size of our orders and get the attention of industry. We have also made the deliberate decision to order aggressively, or stated another way, consciously over-order. This was and is a deliberate attempt to acquire goods given the uncertainty around timeliness of receipts and delivery. As you can imagine, close collaboration with provincial and territorial governments is imperative to our success. To that end, the Minister of PSPC has established a federal, provincial, territorial ministerial table on procurement, which is helping to bring even greater coordination in identifying and meeting supply needs. The third prong is domestic. Under the leadership of the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, discussions have been launched with domestic industry in Canada to help fill the gap on a medium and longer term basis. Many companies from across Canada have answered that call, with some manufacturers completely shifting their production lines to meet the urgent need. My department's role in this case is to establish contracts with these companies, and we've already begun to do so, and I will get into that in a moment. Some challenges. Mr. Chair, I would be misleading the committee members if I left anyone with the impression that procuring in this environment is easy or risk-free. There are many risks. We are buying products at a high volume from unfamiliar suppliers, and that can present challenges both in terms of delivery and in terms of quality. Limited availability of many of these products is resulting in buyers overbidding. I'd mentioned the competition earlier, and established orders are often redirected to those willing to pay the most. On top of this, we are seeing export controls change in China and requirements for medical supplies, rules around those changing as well. And I've mentioned China already, and that situation has changed a couple of times, and it's worth keeping an eye on as rules change there. Successfully navigating this environment requires significant support on the ground. This is an area where we have had to adjust our strategy to better align with reality. Given the emergence of new players and the shortage of supply, we can no longer rely solely on Canadian distributors to obtain product. Our officials are working closely with partners in other countries, including embassies, to ensure our supply chain. This on-the-ground support and expertise is proving invaluable as diplomatic staff and external partners assist in vetting companies in advancing our purchases to ensure better quality. This is in addition to the on-the-ground support to ensure product delivery, logistics, and warehousing expertise to help secure our shipments and bring them home to Canada. This support includes receiving product as it comes off a production line, quickly inspecting it for quality, arranging for shipment to a warehouse and that we have secured at an airport, and actively securing customs clearance. Through all of this, we have had to significantly accelerate our procurement processes to make quick decisions and streamline contracting steps. Contracts that usually take several months to finalize are being put in place in days, if not hours. Traditional competitive approaches would have meant that the product would be sold to another buyer before we made a decision, in an environment where prices are increasing rapidly and rules and regulations are changing overnight. But even after our shipments arrive in Canada, the Public Health Agency must first inspect purchase supplies and get them to where they're needed across the country. The same is true for any supplies we produce in various regions across the country. To help us with this logistics efforts and to help our colleagues at the Public Health Agency of Canada, we have reached an arrangement with Amazon Canada to do delivery and warehousing inside Canada. Canada Post and Purolator are also playing a role in this effort, and that is really to help the Public Health Agency of Canada make sure that the PPE gets to the locations it is needed most. This is all about moving supplies from where they are manufactured into the eventual hands of our doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals as fast as possible. PSPC has a role in doing that. Let me turn now to the latest numbers in terms of orders and deliveries. And these numbers are as of April 13th, and they change rapidly. So as of April 13th, we have managed to order more than 293 million surgical masks and more than 130 million N95 respirators, a key piece of protection for healthcare workers. To date, we have received deliveries of more than 17 million surgical masks and just over 609,000 N95 respirators. To meet longer-term supply needs, we are working to establish a domestic manufacturing contract in Canada with Medicom of Pointe-Claire, Quebec for these masks. Like all of the equipment countries are seeking, ventilators are in short supply. In this tight market, we have managed to secure orders for 32,000 ventilators from companies, from a variety of companies, including Canadian companies Thornhill Medical, CAE, Starfish, and FTI Professional Grade. In addition, we have ordered more than 20 million liters of hand sanitizer. Delivery has already started and will continue over the coming months. This is supported domestically in part by an agreement with Fluid Energy, a Calgary-based company. And we have ordered over 900 million pairs of gloves, and to date have already received nearly 5 million pairs of gloves. We have ordered 17 million face shields. This includes an agreement with Bauer, who has shifted their hockey skate production lines to make face shields that are so important to frontline medical staff. Test kits is an area of frequent discussion. When it comes to test kits, supplies are being delivered, including hundreds of thousands of swabs, and we continue to work to procure more. I would note that there is a global shortage of reagent, which is an important chemical used in testing. It's something we are aggressively seeking out and ordering, and we continue to monitor the situation with Health Canada on the availability of global supplies. I would also like to mention that Health Canada and the Public Health Agency of Canada are accelerating regulatory reviews of new tests and other products so that more products are available to support our response. Here at home, we have recently awarded a contract to Spartan, an Ottawa-based company that will be developing rapid test kits to test more than 1 million Canadians for the virus. This is on top of the testing that is already being done by provinces and territories. These are just some of the things we procured and a handful of the Canadian companies that are rising to the challenge and involved in the response. We are constantly adding to our orders and identifying new needs. Just before I wrap up, Mr. Chair, a couple of other things I should highlight for the committee because the department is offering support in other ways besides procurement. I've already mentioned our interpreters here today. The Translation Bureau is supporting the communication of COVID-19 related information to Canadians. This includes sign language, official language translation, Indigenous language interpretation for government officials, ministers, and the Prime Minister. And as we manage one of the largest portfolios of real estate across the country, we are currently inventorying our holdings to explore how to best provide communities with the support for secure accommodations that they may need in the future. This obviously involves working with local governments and provincial partners as well. In closing, Mr. Chair, the most important role we're playing is the purchase of vital supplies. These are unprecedented times, and the government is taking unprecedented measures to get equipment to the front lines. While we are making significant progress, we are operating in a hyper-competitive market, and we must continue to be vigilant. We know that we may be dealing with spikes in COVID-19 infections in Canada for months to come, and we need to be prepared for all scenarios. On behalf of the health officials that we support, my department will continue to seek out supplies and secure the necessary product for our healthcare professionals that they need to help Canadians and themselves safe. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews. We go now to our questioning rounds. As noted before, we have agreed amongst all parties that we will do 3 full rounds. So starting the first round, we start with Mr. General. Mr. General, please go ahead, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for coming. Again, this is intent is to get to better support and advise the government on pandemics, current and potentially future. So they appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedules to show up today. They do want to go to Ms. Eaton, if you don't mind, and just ask a couple questions with regards to seniors. You highlighted them in particular as part of your opening comments, and we're seeing that right now we're immersed in technology here with Zoom and others with FaceTime. I know that not all seniors are immersed with those technologies, and facilities have closed their doors to outsiders to protect seniors, but the stories of neglect are on the rise in the country. Question for you, Ms. E. Do you think allowing family members or a designated family member to occasionally visit using all appropriate health protocols would be beneficial for a senior's mental health during this time? And if not now, do you think it's an area the government should prioritize when they start executing plans to get back to the new normal?
I'm not an expert in the management of long-term care homes, so it would be difficult for me to comment on that. But I can say generally that isolation is something that drives anxiety and depression in everyone, but particularly in the older population. And one of the good things I believe about what's happening with CMHAs across the country is that they've turned their walk-in services to virtual and telephone services. The telephone, a much maligned piece of technology, which suddenly has a lot of relevance right now in COVID-19. And I believe that by reaching out to seniors' homes through the telephone and providing telephone support to residents, we could make a real difference in decreasing that isolation.
Thank you, and certainly don't intend for you to be an expert on long-term care facilities. Mostly just looking for your advice on the mental health aspect of these questions. Second question: what tools and measures need to be available to support Canadians' mental health once isolation starts being lifted and Canadians start adapting to a new normal?
I think it's very important that community resources be available. I mentioned the Bounce Back program, and I think that that is one that has tremendous relevance. It's a program that is delivered online and on the telephone, so you get a coach who helps you work through a cognitive behavioral therapy program. That program is being scaled in Ontario and scaled in British Columbia. But unfortunately, smaller provinces do not have access to those tools and resources. And we see a strong role for the federal government to play to help create parity of access to those kinds of programs that would give people in rural, remote communities, any isolated community, in fact, an opportunity to have training that would make a long-term difference in their mental health.
Great, thank you. And you also, I know certain things here in Alberta. Text for Hope is a very popular service that's been used. You mentioned also at the beginning the anxieties of some of the frontline workers that you've heard from or experienced. Would you agree, again, from the mental health perspective, that the lack of PPE for our frontline workers has led to mental health struggles?
I believe that is one of their large areas of anxiety, as Dr. Liu had mentioned as well, not having the equipment that you need to protect you. And that does create more anxiety. And so, yes, I believe that protective equipment is important. Certainly, once again, we want to be there to support frontline responders, especially with peer-based programs where professionals who have walked that walk, the same walk as the frontline responder, have created programs and supports particularly to address their needs.
Great. Is the government working directly with the Canadian Mental Health Association to address some of these during the pandemic? So I guess from mid January to current date.
We're very pleased that a partnership that we have with CAMH and with Crisis Services Canada is going to be funded by the federal government. It hasn't been announced yet, but we're really delighted to have that support.
Do you know when that's planning to be announced?
I don't at this point.
In time during the current pandemic, I guess, is that?
Yes. Yes, I think it's imminent. Yes.
Okay. Hope to keep the committee up to speed on when that does be put in place. Resources put in place in December and January prior to the pandemic to support frontline workers. What types of resources were those we saw from the government?
I am not familiar with those resources to frontline workers. Sorry.
I was on the assumption that there weren't any, so I think you just you cleared that up for me. So thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. General. We go now to Dr. Pawlowski. Dr. Pawlowski, please go ahead. 6 minutes.
Thank you. Obviously, I think for a lot of people, especially the healthcare workers, the hottest topic right now is PPEs and specifically N95 masks and their availability. So my question is to Mr. Matthews and the procurement people. Now, you've said you've ordered 130 million N95 masks, but to date, there's only been the delivery of, I believe, 609,000. Can you tell us when we're expecting to get more masks and specifically N95 masks?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. It's a multi-part answer. So the product is coming in every couple of days. A lot of it does come from China. So we have arranged for fairly regular flights to come from Shanghai into Canada as the product is ready. So we're seeing a pretty steady flow of products coming out of our orders in China, particularly. We've also had some recently come in from 3M, and then that would go into the Public Health Agency of Canada distribution system for distribution to provinces and territories. I think one of the other, one more point, Mr. Chair. One of the other things I should flag is this is in addition to procurement that provinces and territories are doing on their own, and some of which is N95 related. So some of the materials we're bringing back from overseas on the charters we have arranged are specific for provinces and territories where we have room. So we're adding that into the mix as well. But that would obviously go directly to the province or territory that ordered it.
So like the N95, every couple of days there's expecting more supplies in it. How long does it take between the time it arrives in Ottawa or Toronto, wherever it arrives, to get out to the various places?
Things. So the process would be as follows. There would be an inspection of the goods once they actually arrive in Canada at the Public Health Agency warehouse. And there's actually some specific testing that happens for N95. So there's a quality check there. That process takes a couple of days before it actually then goes out to the provinces. And so we're looking to accelerate that. And then after that step, frankly, up to the provinces to decide where the need is the greatest. So that goes into their distribution system. And I really can't give you a good line of sight into how the provinces allocate it out.
I think the Globe and Mail said something about procurement being a Wild West in China with a lot of actors all chasing the same thing. Now, what can you do to reassure us that we as Canadians aren't being too much the nice guys? I've lived and worked in a lot of other different countries, and I have this kind of picture, and it must have happened to me, waiting faithfully in a line for a bus to come. And as soon as the bus came, everyone crowded around and jammed through the door, and I kind of stood there and waited. And by the second time, you obviously figured the only way I'm going to get on that bus is to fight my way into it. So I kind of have this notion and worry that as Canadians in China, we're doing all the right things. We're playing by the rules. We're getting outbid. We're getting outfought for what we need. And so what can you reassure the frontline health workers that we're in there duking it out with everyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think this is an area where we can talk about how strategy has changed since day one. And I did mention in my opening remarks that this notion of putting in longer term contracts with a variety of suppliers to ensure a steady stream of arrival of goods is important. And so the steps we've taken, and we'll talk specifically about on the ground in China, understanding the market, very critical. There were some changes in export rules, and you need to be dealing with people who understand what those rules are. So we did engage the embassy overseas to help us, both in terms of vetting suppliers, relationships with suppliers, making sure they understood the rules in terms of export. We also adjusted our logistics process to make sure that basically when the product comes off the factory, we are there, we have people there to get it. So we are receiving it directly on the factory floor. We are handling the logistics to take it to a warehouse that we have rented at the Shanghai airport. We then have some partners on the ground who help us get clearance. And then we have taken care of the cargo arrangements to bring it back home to Canada. So that's an example of the adjustments we're making. The number of manufacturers we're dealing with is significant. So, the final check, I would say, is we bring it back to Canada. As we get more experience with some of these manufacturers, we're getting a better sense of who's producing high quality goods and who's having some struggles. And, we cycle that back to our folks on the ground in China so we can make whatever adjustments we need to make.
Thank you. Another concern has been about being able to access some important medications, for example, propofol, midazolam, fentanyl, things that you need to sedate people or as anesthetic agents for people who are intubated, and a possible shortage of those things. Can you tell us what the government has been doing in order to procure those drugs, and if we have any capacity within this country to be able to start making them?
Probably a better question for colleagues from Health Canada and PHAC in terms of the government's approach to securing those goods. And I can tell you PSPC, as a purchaser of these kinds of drugs historically, has been a fairly small player. We do have some activity. It's one that we expect will ramp up in the near future. And I think you've touched on a key question is, in addition to procurement, what's the domestic capacity question? I think we'd have to, time will tell on that front. So I know Health Canada's preoccupied with these things, and I suspect it'll be an area for heightened engagement as we go forward.
Okay, I guess I have a quick question, hopefully for Dr. Liu. I think you've had a lot of experience working in epidemics in other countries. You talked about protecting the frontline healthcare workers and the anxiety related to not having enough PPEs. What do you think about the use of my understanding the name is popper suits, the kind of hazmat suits with ventilators or respirators, which you used like with Ebola. My understanding is in places in Italy where they used those kind of things, 0 healthcare workers became sick. I understand that isn't being suggested as necessary by the provinces, or I don't think the Public Health Agency of Canada or WHO, but I think certainly people, if they're working all day with COVID-19 patients, would like to have those. What do you think about the possibility of using those and the desirability of using those?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I think that there's plus and minus. I think that when I was in the Ebola Center, I must say that with my asthma in West Africa and in DRC, I felt almost safer than being in my ER in Montreal, because I knew that I was protected, and I knew that if I were doing the right thing, and if that infection would not happen. The thing is we're not in this kind of environment. The downside of those kind of hazmat suit is the fact that you are dehumanizing healthcare, and patients don't like it. People don't like to have cosmonaut to take care of them. You completely cutting the human factor of caring. So much more than only having like a shield with an N95 and a sort of a vest on top. So I think that if we were to have like really dedicated structure where people could work in there, and there would be like room temperature that would be, I would say, bearable for everybody. Maybe this is something you could entertain, especially for ICU, where there's a lot of aerosolized particles, and then you're much more at risk of being infected. I don't think I would do that, for all the frontline worker. I think it would be a bit over the top.
Thank you, Dr. Pawlowski. Nous allons maintenant,
And now we'll give the floor to Mr. Thériault. Thank you. I'd like to thank all our witnesses for being here today. I have a question for Dr. Liu. You have great expertise when it comes to epidemics, great expertise on the field. I know we're managing the first wave and trying to get through the first wave. But I would like to know, what do you think about... I would like to know whether you think that we could have been better prepared to manage this pandemic, south of our borders and elsewhere.
Just pause this for a moment.
I'm having no problem hearing the translation here, so it's okay for me.
So Mr. Davies is not getting any translation. Could you, Don, can you just check your setup, make sure you are still on the English channel?
Eh oui.
I'm on the English channel, Mr. Chair.
I can hear it as well, the translation, no problem.
Is it perhaps just weak, Don, or is it just not there?
No, it's not there at all.
Hi there,
suspend. Go ahead.
Oh, Mr. Davies, we were wondering if it would be possible for you to toggle the interpretation off and on and see if perhaps there's an issue on your device?
Sure. Maybe we can recommence, and my apologies to Monsieur Thériault.
Maybe we could just check the translation.
Test the interpreter English channel, testing interpreter 122. Can we check interpretation? Interpretation check English channel 123. So you want me to speak? Says Monsieur Thériault.
Okay, now?
No, I'm not hearing any translation still.
Okay, let's suspend for a couple minutes until we get this sorted out. Meeting is now suspended. Monsieur Thériault will commence. the meeting is now back in session. Monsieur Thériault, I will reset your clock. You're about 40 seconds in, but we'll start from scratch so you have the full context of your remarks. Thank you. Go ahead.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for the benefit of my friend Don, I will start over. I was saying, Dr. Liu, you have a lot of experience in the field with epidemics. And before getting into more specific questions, I'd like to say that I really appreciated your evidence and your proposals in public health in that field. It's probably the field of medicine that is the most political since the beginning of the pandemic. Sometimes I think that might be a bit of an obstacle in terms of what really needs to be done. What is your overall assessment? Just barely a month ago, the Canadian border was still open to international travel, and with the U.S., we know the U.S. is now the biggest hotspot on the planet, but the border was still open a month ago with the U.S. And back then, Canada was maintaining a very low risk assessment for Canadians. Perhaps in public health, low risk is what we're actually experiencing, but it's a question of concepts and vocabulary. There have still been quite a few deaths for this to be classified as a low risk. So what's your assessment of our preparedness for the first wave? Because it's the second wave that we need to think about now.
Merci beaucoup pour
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, I have experience with epidemics and pandemics, but this is the first time we've had one of this scale, a global pandemic. Could we have been better prepared? I think that there are some signs that were clear, and in January, when a public health emergency was declared, a worldwide emergency. What did Canada do to get ready? That's something that will have to be studied after this passes. But when a public health emergency of international concern is declared, when that type of global declaration is made, things need to be done and things need to be analyzed in depth. I have taken part in simulations before, and often those abstract scenarios involve a reaction, but they don't take into account the full ecosystem in which a pandemic plays out. So I don't think anyone ever imagined that everybody was going to want N95s at the same time, that there was going to be a run on PPE. That was not contemplated. So everyone was caught off guard here. And I think this is a big lesson for all of us. With respect to borders, I think that's an excellent question, but the WHO was not recommending that borders be closed. So that's something to look at in our response. Perhaps there was some complacency. Perhaps we were asleep at the switch. So what do we need to do next time round? The third witness, Mr. Matthews, I'm sure he's not even sleeping at night. He's doing everything he can to get his hands on this equipment. I don't mean to criticize him, but I think there's got to be a threshold. There's got to be a much quicker reaction. Something has to click sooner so that people respond. It takes a clear response. And you have to rely on authorities who have experience. I can only speak for myself, but we have a lot of knowledge in Canada. There are a lot of international organizations that involve Canadians. We've been involved in situations in other parts of the world, and those experiences should be brought to the table. So yeah, I think we reacted a bit slowly. We didn't take advantage of all our experience. We didn't take full advantage. And maybe the messages weren't clear enough that this is dangerous. Maybe we left the borders open for too long. With Ebola, that was one thing. It was clear that you shouldn't close borders and put people in quarantine. But then there was a full 180, and all of those things were suddenly done. So you can't wait for a peak in cases to react. But now we're seeing that social or physical distancing is a key measure. So I think there was a lot of preparedness, but we're on a very steep learning curve here. We are going to have to deal with a second wave at some point, inevitably. And I think there's a risk that the economy could be restarted too quickly. There's going to be a lot of pressure to do that. But as long as there's no vaccine, as long as we don't have enough personal protective equipment, as long as we don't have enough being produced here in sufficient quantities to deal with the second wave, I imagine we shouldn't be in any rush to let our guard down. Absolutely, that's an excellent point. That's what's keeping me up at night, the specter of a second wave. People are patting themselves on the back already, saying things aren't so bad. We're not as bad as Italy. We're not as bad as New York. So phew, but I don't think we should be lulled into complacency. We don't know what immunity people have, those who've recovered. In China, it would appear that some people are not significantly immune for having been infected and recovered. So will we truly have a significant portion of the population that is immune? I think it's very important, and I'm talking to my colleague, Mr. Matthews here. Yes, we need tests, and we need serum tests, because that will probably help us know whether people are truly immune or not. Because just because someone's had COVID-19 and their immune system has responded, we want to be able to tell those people whether or not they are truly protected against reinfection. We need to be able to get that information and tell people. So that's why it's important. People need to go back to their normal lives, of course, and the economy has to be gradually restarted, incrementally. And I think if places in Africa were able to live with Ebola for 2 years, then I think Canada can live with COVID-19 for a while. The important thing is to make sure that we have confidence in our public authorities, asking Canadians to make the kind of sacrifices they're making today, both physical, emotional, and economical and social sacrifices. If people are to continue doing this, they have to still have confidence in their public authorities. This was difficult in West Africa, in the Congo, and in Yemen. I think we need to really focus on that trust in public authorities. Just a quick comment for Mr. Thériault, your time's up. Thank you.
Monsieur, we go now to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, 6 minutes, please. Davies, you're on mute still.
Hi, can you hear me now, Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. My first question is to Public Works Canada. This week, Health Canada announced that it has approved a new rapid COVID-19 test kit to be used in remote and Indigenous communities. Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Teresa Tam has indicated that the federal government is looking to secure a supply of these devices with 40,000 units per month in the upcoming months, and then to see how that progresses in terms of the supply rate. Could you confirm when these testing kits will be made available to remote and Indigenous communities, and let us know if you're confident whether 40,000 units per month will be a sufficient supply to meet the testing needs of remote and Indigenous communities?
So thank you, Mr. Chair. And the test the member referenced, that was also referenced earlier this week, is one that I referenced in my remarks from Spartan, an Ottawa-based company that has been recently awarded a contract. This is new technology, so I have no comments or opinion on the volume of testing required, but this is a company that is scaling up a new business line. What is interesting about this test is your traditional test needs to be, taken from the potential client and then basically sent off to a lab for testing, and that obviously takes time. If you're in a remote community, that takes more time, and that's just time that people are not comfortable with. So this test that we're talking about here specifically comes with a unit that's almost think about a laboratory in a box type thing. So the unit would go with it, so you can actually do the test on site there. And so it's not just the number of tests, but you also need the unit to go with it. And obviously, because of that type of technology, it would be particularly attractive for remote and isolated communities.
If I might, sir, I understand what the test is. My question is when will they be delivered?
So again, we're starting up here. So we're hoping they hit kind of full production in July, but there's a gradual ramp up. But again, new technology. So we're working with them to kind of get that up and running. We're all anxious to get that going. So it's the delivery details being worked out, but we're hoping they hit full production scale by July.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Liu, reports are emerging that COVID-19 is disproportionately impacting racialized communities in the United States. In Chicago, for example, more than half of all confirmed cases and 72% of recorded deaths have been among African Americans, who make up just 32% of the population of that city. Are we seeing similar disparities in Canada? You spoke of vulnerable communities. Do we even have the data to make that determination?
Thank you very much for the question. It's a very good question. I don't think that we have yet that granularity in terms of information on racial background. The only thing we have is on elders as being more hit than the rest of the population.
Okay, thank you. And you spoke of the importance, in your view, of ensuring that our healthcare system doesn't become, to use your words, a vector of transmission. And if I understood your evidence correctly, you were suggesting that we have separate COVID-19 health areas in our health facilities. If I have that correct, can you give us an idea of how well we're meeting that advice? Is that what's happening in our healthcare facilities across our country?
Thanks again for the question. I think that right now, very few people have decided to go for a standalone COVID dedicated facility. What people are trying to do now is to have a better, I would say, a hospital in a hospital, taking a sector of a hospital, being totally dedicated to COVID-19 and try to have a closed circuit in that respect. I think it's feasible, but it's very, very challenging. And it's hard to make people understand they can go from one side to the other side. I think that you can meet that if people would be willing as well to have COVID dedicated staff, meaning that there would be nurses, doctor, aid to the beneficiaries only to COVID-19, and then we commit to test them regularly. I think it's feasible, as long as we don't have a scenario like New York.
Right. I'm just trying to get a sense of, I understand your advice, but are we meeting that advice? Is that happening right now? Can you give us any indication of that?
I don't think so. Not for all the hospital that I'm saying this, and because people don't know what it is to have a closed circuit. People didn't work in Ebola or in cholera camp before, and they have no clue of what really means, and they think, oh, c'est pas grave, it's not, Yes, you cannot do that. You cannot swap from one to the other, one side to the other side. I said you need to completely undress. You should go wash and then move the other side. So there's sort of this sort of laxity.
Okay, now you did mention seniors' homes, and we know that close to half of all COVID-19 related deaths in Canada are in seniors' homes. And in response, the federal government has recently published a series of non-binding guidelines to reduce the spread of infections in long-term care facilities. Two-part question. In your view, should the implementation of these guidelines be mandatory? And are there any additional measures necessary, in your view, to address the systemic problems at long-term care homes that make viruses easily transmissible?
So I'm very limited because I don't know the guidelines. I've been working on the expert panel, but we haven't put our recommendation, and I don't know the specific guideline you're talking about. So I don't know what's in it and what it implies. I'm sorry to be limited in that respect.
Well, that's okay.
I think on the long term, I think that it's important that we, and then everybody is mentioning it, but it's true that if we want to have our elder, being cared for properly, then we need to have the adequate number of staff, and this is not what it seems to happen right now. So, yeah, that's all I can say on that.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. That concludes our first round of questions. We start now with our second round of questions. We start with Ms. Block. Ms. Block, please go ahead. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all our witnesses for joining us today. And thank you for the opportunity to join your committee. I really appreciate it. Earlier today, the CBC ran a story about 2 million N95 masks and approximately 400,000 gloves that were thrown into a landfill last year when the National Emergency Strategic Stockpile Warehouse in Regina, Saskatchewan was closed. The story goes on to state that the gloves and masks had been purchased in 2009, that they had expired in 2014 and were thrown away in 2019. And I do want to say before I ask my questions that I do understand that PSPC had nothing to do with that decision, and that the NES is managed by the Public Health Agency in Canada. However, I do have some questions for PSPC. Can you tell us how much PPE your department has purchased on behalf of PHAC or the NES in the past 10 years?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I was delayed in getting off mute. In the last 10 years, I cannot answer that, Mr. Chair, but if that's something I'm sure we can easily undertake to get back to the committee on. And now, before I say that, I should ask my colleagues if they happen to know, but I suspect their answer is the same as mine. Hearing silence, we'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you for that. I look forward to receiving that written response. Can you tell us then if PHAC or NES has an inventory management plan of any kind? Are you aware of a management plan? And as PSPC, would you be part of that plan because you are procuring these supplies?
So there's clearly a link between what comes in and then from a procurement perspective, it gets delivered to the Public Health Agency of Canada, Mr. Chair, as the members indicated there. They would then have an intake process in terms of, inspecting, counting, warehousing, all those things, and then a process to allocate out. I did mention in my opening remarks that obviously distribution is very critical in this environment. So PHAC, with our assistance, has recently put in a contract with Amazon, supported by Canada Post and Purelator, to help with the warehousing and logistics. But they have a sense of their inventory and they have a sense of where it is, and then they're leaning on experts in logistics to help them get it out to where it needs to go.
So this may be the same question, just asked in a different way. I'm not sure. Does PSPC have any regular or reoccurring requests for procurement by the PHAC right now?
We have an ongoing dialogue with PHAC on orders. We've received several larger orders from the Public Health Agency of Canada, which are what we're calling collaborative buys with provinces and territories. The last one, I think the most recent, and Ariane can correct me here, came in on April the 9th. And it's a big bulk order that they're looking to fill over a number of months, and it's got something like 80 million N95 respirators in there. So that's not something they're expecting to get filled overnight, but it does speak to the long-term planning behind their ordering. So there is an ongoing series of orders coming in, yes.
Right. So I recognize that they would have orders right now. Just prior to COVID-19, striking our country and the world, did PHAC have ongoing or regular reoccurring orders with PSPC?
We would place orders for the government writ large. So we would have a number of departments, including PHAC, that we would have regular dialogue with in terms of orders. I'll turn to Ariane for a second to see if her memory is better than mine on pre-COVID orders. But I'd encourage you, Chair, to think beyond just PHAC. We've got, correctional services, border services, so a range of federal clients who would be ordering these type of goods, just not in the quantity we're seeing now, but certainly would have a range there. So, Ariane, is there anything you want to add in terms of pre-COVID orders from PHAC?
Ms. Reza, you're on mute.
Apologies. No, I don't think there's anything further. Really, it was starting in my knowledge of it starts kind of late January onwards to March.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn my questions in another direction, still for PSPC. With so many companies retooling and repurposing to make PPE, have there been any discussions within the department about how federal government procurement can encourage long-term domestic manufacturing of PPE here at home?
Certainly there has. And as mentioned earlier, Mr. Chair, this involves a great deal of leadership from our colleagues at the Department of ISED or Industry in terms of assessing a company's ability to scale up quickly, because speed is important here. And then what is their ability to participate as a long-term player in the various fields. So I think you've got a couple of scenarios here, Mr. Chair. One is a company that's retooling deliberately, temporarily as part of the cause. And another one where you've actually got a company that's looking to stand up an ongoing business line. And so we have relationships we're pursuing right now with a company called Medicom, which I believe I mentioned, to basically become an ongoing manufacturer of N95 and surgical masks on a go-forward basis, because we think the domestic supply is important. You've seen other examples where companies have retooled to start produce hand sanitizer. Is that a permanent switch, or is that just something they're doing temporarily because it was a pretty easy handover for them to make? That's, I don't want to overstate. It was they were able to repurpose very quickly. Do they plan on staying in that business, or is this temporary? That's a discussion to have with them as time goes on. But some of them, N95 masks for surgical masks, ongoing need there, absolutely.
Thank you, Ms. Block. We go now to Ms. Sadhu. Ms. Sadhu, you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, all the witnesses joining us today. My first question is to Deputy Minister Bill Matthew. I have come to know one of the largest Amazon distribution centers in my riding, Brampton South. And as you mentioned in your statement, you have a contract with that. What are you doing to ensure that critical supplies of PPE get distributed where they are needed most in timely manner, including Indigenous communities, wherever they needed immediately? Can you explain that?
Certainly I can. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So two basic pieces, and these are very obvious, but important for people. There's the procurement itself. And then once the goods arrive, there's actually the logistic solution to distribute it. And so the system we have in place, and this is the Public Health Agency of Canada that's managing the distribution, they actually get the goods in. into their warehouse. Amazon is assisting them with Canada Post and Purolator to distribute to where it's needed. So that's there's a couple of scenarios there. One is where we had done bulk ordering collaboratively with provinces and territories. That stuff would move fairly quickly directly to the province or territory that ordered it. There's another scenario in place where a province or territory realizes that it is running out of something urgently, a little bit of an unforecasted demand. So there's a process, and again, this is drifting into our friends at Public Health Agency of Canada's territory. There's a process where they have tables where they get communications about urgent need, and they would take care of urgent deliveries with whatever the most efficient way is possible to meet that need. So the distribution is critical, and that's why there was a recognition that bringing in some outside expertise, Amazon, Canada Post, Purolator, to help with that was absolutely essential. Equally important, though, is the collaboration that the health tables, federal, provincial, territorial, would have in terms of ordering who needs what and the collaboration there.
Thank you. And next question is to Canada Mental Health Associations. Canadian already struggling with the mental health issues as of the young people, Indigenous communities. 2 weeks ago, I heard from the members of my own constituency's youth councils. My question is to the experts from the Canadian Mental Health Association. Today, we launched the new mental health portal. Minister Haidu's announcements, Wellness Together Canada Today. My understanding, Newfoundland and Labrador has the similar provincial support from years. How do you see is helping vulnerable Canadians, especially youth and our healthcare heroes? And how are you going to raise awareness about the service to make sure all Canadians get benefit from it?
Thank you very much for that question. Yeah, we're very excited and pleased to see this national hub. As we understand it, the hub will provide tools and resources for everyone, but we'll have specific tools that will address particular communities, and it will also feature a crisis line. So I believe we've already done some social media on it to promote it, and we will be sharing it with our branches and divisions. We see that as one step in a process to support Canadians, and certainly in the short term, it makes excellent sense. And we hope the government will consider as well adding on some services to support longer term recovery.
Because why I'm saying that seniors who don't know how to use the technology. So what kind of the services you are providing for that, and especially the ethnic communities, if they are language barrier? Can you explain that?
I know that some of our services, particularly in metropolitan areas, actually provide services with for different language communities. They're translated into key community languages. I believe that's true in Vancouver and also in Toronto to address those issues. But we also know that one of the big issues for immigrants in particular is stigma around mental health. So in addition to having those services, it's also really important that we promote those services to those communities and ensure that that they feel welcome there.
And especially our healthcare heroes who are on the front line, they are working now. Is there any special arrangement for them?
Not that we do have two programs that I mentioned, OSI Can and Resilient Minds, both of which are suitable for front care line workers and could be expanded to serve more clients.
Just a quick follow-up.
Thank you, Ms. Sidhu.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
May I actually remind all participants, if they have to leave their desks, to try not to turn off your video when you do that. It makes the windows move around, and it makes it hard to keep track of where you are. So we'll carry on now with Dr. Kitchen. Dr. Kitchen, please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you everybody for being here. Greatly appreciate you taking the time to come to the meeting and do this video conferencing. So, Dr. Liu, I really appreciate your comments and some of your comments. And Mr. Davies sort of touched on one of the questions I wanted to ask you. or bring to attention, because we talked about the issue of protecting our dedicated staff as well as dedicated facilities. And I can tell you here in Saskatchewan, we have gone to certain designated hospitals that are delegated throughout the province that are being designated as specific for COVID-based hospitals, and other hospitals are picking up emergent and acute care type situations. So just so you're aware of that. Your comments, though, I just would like to hear, they lead into my questioning a little bit more about testing and the issue of immunity testing, and whether you see that as something that we should be doing at this present time with our present day healthcare workers, those people that are on the front line as they move forward. They want to get there, they want to be out there, whether it is in the hospitals or whether it's even in our long-term care facilities, where they want to make certain that they're protected when they go in to assist the clients that they care for. Just your comments on that, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think in terms of testing, and it's hard to make a strategy when you have scarce resources, but having there should be, I would say, a prioritization of who can be tested, and I don't think that is clear yet. But I think there should be recommendation for worker, because right now we to be tested, you need to have some symptom. Now it's much larger than what it used to be, but it needs to be much. That now we have included the GI symptoms and then plus the respiratory symptom, and you only need to have one symptom. But we know that there are asymptomatic carriers. So this is why I think that when we're going to be able to afford it, testing our healthcare worker or frontline worker, which could be in pharmacy as well or in other places like the elder homes, I think for me should be a priority. This is something that we are doing in some places, and I think, for example, in places like the First Nation area, where we know that we have a vulnerable community, we don't want to import COVID-19. So there should be testing. Just for example, when you have people from Montreal to go back to Nunavik, if you just ask them, do you have symptoms? Honestly, I think that people who are dying to go back to their community, I'm not sure they're going to share exactly, what's going on. And so I think that we should just test people.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Matthews, I appreciate your comments earlier, and just a question for you. I recognize that you're in the process of procurement. Mm-hmm. How much interaction do you have with PHAC in their simulation models that they might do as they simulate a scenario? As to, do they communicate with you as what they might anticipate from that, where there might be a shortage, how they can access or need access to certain PPE type equipment? Is that part of the process at all?
Well, I think it's part of the outcome, Mr. Chair. So what I would say is they run their models and then they place orders. And as I mentioned earlier, some of those orders are very large. And so that would be the outcome of their planning, would be the orders they place with us. And I mentioned the last one we received, I believe, was 80 million masks over a long period of time. So that would be the interaction there.
So it's an after of the fact. It's not a during the process to say this is our scenario, and all of a sudden we're anticipating 100,000 needs for masks, and we need them from you. So they come to you to say, how quickly can you access those?
Well, we certainly have an ongoing discussion about supply lines and time it takes. So very well plugged in on our plans around domestic capacity with ISED and how long, when that might come online. But I think it's twofold. One is their long-term orders. And then there's, as I mentioned earlier, if there's any kind of immediate unforecasted urgency that pops up in a province or territory, they will get on the phone with us urgently to say, can you get us something ASAP? And we have the odd one of those as well.
So, and you've mentioned a lot about challenging times and how it is for you to access equipment, et cetera. And there have been a number of situations or things that I've seen, and I'm sure my colleagues have seen, that deal with someone trying to improve a respirator, for example, coming up with a plastic product that might actually take one respirator or ventilator to create it into ability to do 2 or 3 type issues. And so those issues that obviously have to be recognized and standardized, but it's a challenge for you. at the Finance Committee meeting on last Friday, there was a gentleman by the name of Mr. Sabato, and he was quoted as saying, "At a time when the government is appealing to manufacturers to retool and produce needed plastic products for the healthcare sector, masks, ventilators, hoses, IV bags, IV tubing, PEs like plastic shields, labeling plastics as toxic is counterproductive. It disparages and demonizes the Canadian plastic industry, which has worked very hard to alleviate the effects of COVID-19 crises," end quote. So my question is basically the use of plastics is necessary to treat a lot of those suffering from COVID-19. And by using items such as these, could you anticipate the crisis carrying on if we anticipate that the crisis is going to carry on for who knows how long, and we deem these plastics a Schedule I toxic substance, does the PSPS see this potentially having a negative impact on the procurement of medical devices and PPE with respect to COVID-19?
So thanks, Mr. Chair. I can only speak to my experience dealing with Canadian existing suppliers as well as those looking to emerge into the markets. Has not been something that has been raised with me one bit, and that's both through interaction with our website in terms of looking for supply, but as well as our interactions with our Department of ISED in terms of tooling up domestic industry. So it has not come on my radar at all. That's not, obviously others are hearing about it. The supply chains for some of these products clearly involve plastic. So it's an important component in terms of what's being manufactured, but has it been raised with me as a barrier? Not to date.
Thank you, Dr. Kitchen. We go now to Mr. Van Bynen. Mr. Van Bynen, please go ahead, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last month, the town of Newmarket launched a hashtag Stand Apart Together campaign, announcing a group of 10 community positivity ambassadors to spread stories about people doing good things and to spread positivity during these difficult times. Now, also, both the Newmarket Chamber of Commerce and the Aurora Chamber of Commerce are providing their members with regular opportunities to check in on one another and stay connected and to share best practices through virtual coffee conversations and virtual networking events. And my question is to the Mental Health Association. I'm wondering if you've been seeing many of these local activities surface to keep people connected and what your thoughts are on their role in preserving mental health in our communities.
Yeah, we've been so pleased with responses across the country and that Canadian idea of caremongering. And there are wonderful Facebook groups across the country doing that. One of our branches, the Quebec division in Quebec City, has set up a secure kind of group chat for 8 people at a time to come and talk about their issues. And we're seeing similar movements across the country. I think it's invaluable. I love walking around my neighborhood and seeing signs that say we're in this together. I think a lot of people expect that there is social decay when a pandemic happens, but in fact, the opposite is true. We see social cohesion, and that is incredibly important for all of our mental health.
Are there any of these types of efforts in particular that stand out to you? And if you could you briefly share them with the committee?
Well, I mentioned our one Quebec group. I think there have been certainly these Facebook groups that are providing care and going out and shopping for people. And what we've seen in CMHAs is some of them are actually keeping their doors open. So even though the general advice here in Ontario, for example, is to shut your doors, some of them have said, no, we have to be open for walk-in clients. And so they take precautions, but they are still there and keeping the doors open because they feel that mental health is a frontline response. They are frontline responders for those people with mental health challenges.
I'm curious about the precautions that you mentioned. We've seen so much misinformation going on the internet about COVID-19. What would your recommendations be in terms of people who are seeking out some of these chat groups or even virtual counseling? How could they be satisfied that they're getting the types of credentials that they're looking for?
Yes. Well, I think programs that the CMHA runs, for example, and the CMHA is oftentimes the first stop for people searching for mental health resources in their community, but certainly looking for certification. We offer a peer support certification. There are other certifications, certainly the Canadian Psychologists Association, other registered professions that actually have the credentials to provide you with the support that you need. There is a lot of online information as well, and that's where I would also turn to the new government application that actually has evidence-based tools and resources that can be used.
Great, thank you, Dr. Liu. Since you started with Doctors Without Borders, the world has lived through a number of pandemics around the world. To name a few, it's SARS, MERS, Ebola, H1N1, Zika. Can you elaborate on how Doctors Without Borders contributes to the international response in a pandemic?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In terms of Doctors Without Borders, just to give you a bit of it's an organization of 1.6 billion euro of operational budget, working in 72 countries, and 55% of our country of intervention are conflict zones. And we have about 68,000 headcounts working for the organization. So in terms of response to pandemic, I think that we answer epidemics all year long. And the smallest one, the measles that nobody hear about, or the polio or the cholera, over and over and over again. In terms of when it comes to the big pandemic, we actually have, most of the time, I've had much more of a focus in low middle income country or in protected crisis, because this is where there are more needs. But the reality now with COVID-19 is we are actually quite deployed in high income country. For example, in France, in Italy, we have 4 hospitals that we are running. In France, we are doing all the home care with the government. In l'Île-de-France, we work in Germany, we work in Spain, we work in Greece, so we probably will increase our budget in high income country probably by easily, I would think, a tenfold from what we had in the past. So this is something very different, and it's probably linked to the fact there is travel ban, and it's probably linked as well to the fact that we have an expertise to offer in terms of pandemic response, because most of our staff are working to tackling epidemics in different countries. So we work everywhere that we have almost an office. And then right now in Canada, MSF Canada will be working with the infection prevention control in elder homes and in First Nation community.
Thank you, Mr. Van Bynen.
Thank you.
Monsieur Thériault, c'est à vous maintenant. 2 minutes et demi.
It's your turn, Mr. Thériault. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given how little time I have left, Dr. Liu, you indicated, and rightly so, earlier at the end of your testimony, that patients should not be non-COVID patients should not be forced to wait for care, but given that the system is so fragile and underfunded and so on, the decision has been made to free up beds so that there's room to deal with a surge in the first wave of COVID-19 cases. But when the second wave comes, there might be even higher mortality, more need for ICU care. How much time is it going to take to adapt? Because there are surgeries that have been postponed. So how long is it going to take before things get back to balance so that we don't hit a wall in the medium term. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, for those who are not infected with COVID-19, they shouldn't be treated as second-class citizens. But this is a question that comes up with all pandemics, and there are references we can turn to. But look at West Africa, for example. There are probably more people whose situations got worse or they even died from non-Ebola causes rather than from Ebola. That's why, in my view, it's essential to return to essential non-COVID related medical activities in hospital. And that's why there should be dedicated hospitals. There should be COVID-19 facilities and non-COVID-19 facilities, so that because a patient with CF should not be exposed to potential COVID-19 infection. And that's why I've told lots of people this. I think it's important to start planning for the future now and segregate COVID-19 and define what will surge capacity mean with the second wave of COVID-19. I think we are going to have to do some task shifting within the medical community, and probably our residents and med students will probably have to be asked to work at a higher level than they would otherwise. But I don't think a lot's been being done around that. We have to do some planning. We can't leave the system the way it is now. It can't be on hold for COVID-19 indefinitely, because the health of other people will deteriorate, and those people have things that are preventable. We can't just let this go on like this forever. Thank you, Mr. Theriault. Your time is up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now to Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, 2.5 minutes, please.
Arrived in Ontario. Hello, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Go ahead. 2.5 minutes.
May I begin again? Thank you.
Yes.
To the Department of Public Works. I'm sorry, I'm hearing Mr. Theriault speak or someone speak. I'm hearing someone.
Carry on.
Okay, I'll begin again. Mr. Matthews, on April 10, 2020, the Toronto Star reported that a shipment of more than 100,000 testing swabs recently arrived in Ontario contaminated and unusable. And that shipment was the first shipment of an order procured by the federal government, with hundreds of thousands more from the contaminated batch on the way. I'm curious, how is that possible that the federal government procured hundreds of thousands of contaminated swabs, and what quality control measures are in place for federal medical supply procurement? And if so, if we have them in place, why did they fail in that particular case?
Mr. Matthews, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. Couple of aspects to this. Quite accurate in terms of the quantity that was received and deemed unusable, and I'll come back to that in a moment. There is a long-term order in place with a well-known supplier or provider of swabs, and so that is a key order for us in terms of ongoing fulfillment. I did mention in my opening remarks that supply chains are strained and new players are coming on. So you've got factories that are ramping up, and anytime factories kind of add capacity, it comes with risk. In this case, the supplier had recognized in a subsequent shipment that they had a quality issue, so they recalled that, but these ones obviously were not caught in time. Subsequent to that, we have been working with our lab to see if those swabs can be sterilized so they can actually be put back into the system for use. So we are working on that angle as well. So the The issue around quality control, it depends on the piece of equipment. Swabs, in this case, typically not a problem. Known supplier in this case, but it is a strained market. So other types of goods that we procure, there is an ongoing active test on every piece that comes in to sort of check for quality. So obviously on swabs, we have changed our quality control measures, as has the supplier in this case. So it did put us in a bit of a scramble in the short term, but we're optimistic that they have rectified it going forward.
Thank you. Ms. Eaton, Health Canada estimates that 11 million Canadians will access the online mental health services, but we know about 2 million Canadians are going to need one-on-one support. So short-term therapy, 2 to 4 sessions per week to get over the crisis have been estimated by Health Canada. How are we ensuring that these 2 million Canadians, who I would presume have among the most acute mental health needs, are going to receive this one-on-one support?
Thank you for the question. I believe that part of what the government has announced is that there will be a care provider that will be following up with those 2 million Canadians. So they are going to be providing that short-term physiotherapy or psychotherapy for those 2 million Canadians. I believe that is a generous estimate, but we really don't know what that impact will be. And frankly, that is short-term support. And so we actually believe that more Canadians are going to need something, not just for the first 4 months of this planned intervention, but longer. And we don't know who those people will be at this point, or exactly what their needs will be. And so that is one of the great unknowns. How do we make sure that we have the capacity to ramp up to serve all of the needs that are coming? And that is why we are seeking some support from the federal government to ensure that longer term needs are met.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
Thank you.
That wraps up the second round. We start now the third round with Mr. Weber. Mr. Weber, please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm hoping you can hear me okay.
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Excellent. Okay. Thank everyone for being here today. I'm going to address my question, my 2.5 minutes of questioning to Margaret Eaton of the Canadian Mental Health Association. Ms. Eaton, thank you very much. I really enjoyed your presentation today. Your mandate of a mental health for all is wonderful. It would be a dream come true if we can achieve that mandate, because currently I truly believe that Canada does severely lack the capacity for mental health services, in particular in our addictions environment. Ms. Eaton, you talked about your association and help out there, far-reaching 86 divisions and branches throughout Canada, 5,000 staff, 10,000 volunteers, reaching 330 communities. And your phones are currently ringing off the hook right now. Your surge in demand from 25 a day to 700 a day, as you had mentioned. My question to you is, first, is the 5,000 staff, of course, they would be highly trained in dealing with these calls, but you mentioned 10,000 volunteers. What type of training do they have, and do they actually do the counseling in order to help someone perhaps who is on the risk of suicidal tendencies? Can you talk a little bit more about the training of these people?
Yes. The volunteers spread out across the country would have a variety of roles, from people helping out in office work, but some of them are peer support workers. So they are volunteers, oftentimes people with lived experience of mental illness, who have received training through their branch to provide support. Some of those would be crisis response, but not necessarily suicide response. That would be a higher level of training, which some of them would have received. The services are quite different across the country. So depending on the kinds of crisis lines and kinds of support being provided, there would be various involvements. There would also be paid staff answering phones as well. And what a lot of CMHAs have had to do across the country to respond to this surge issue is set up extra lines, fortify the systems underneath these telephone lines to actually deal with these phone calls. And they're repurposing staff, who would have been running programs or doing other work to get them on the phone to handle a kind of triage level of support for people right now.
Excellent. Like many, I have shared the phone numbers, Alberta Health Link, the 811 number here in Alberta, and also the mental health hotline. And in fact, this morning I called both in order to see how long I had to wait for assistance. And I am pleased to report that in Alberta, I was able to access both lines and to get somebody on the line immediately. I apologize to them. I didn't want to waste their time, so I just said, I'm sorry, I'm okay. But anyway, I'm just wondering how other provinces are doing. Are people able to access throughout the country as quickly as I was able to? Is there, you said that there's a vast difference depending on where you are?
Yes. So PEI, for example, has had to establish some new crisis call lines. They didn't have crisis lines that they could turn to. So CMHA PEI is expanding its services. Woodstock has found that its calls are up 50%, so they are repurposing staff there. Moose Jaw has also opened up a new crisis line. And so people are either upgrading what they have or repurposing people or adding new crisis lines in order to deal with the demand. I think there was an initial surge in the first couple of weeks. From what I understand, it has died down a little bit. But I've been struck by the fact of the second wave discussion this afternoon. And we do know these things come in waves, in surges. And so we are concerned that we have enough support to actually provide meaningful care for people beyond, a brief phone call, but to actually be able to deliver services virtually. A lot of those programs that people would have been used to going to, group recovery programs, one-on-one counseling or drop-in centers, all of these things have been taken away. And so we've had to act very quickly to try to virtualize our services, if you will. And we'll need some more support to do that and to meet the demand.
Well, thank you for what you do. I assume my 2.5 minutes are up. If not, I will ask this one quickly, Mr. Chair. That's regarding other countries in the weeks. They are weeks ahead of us, of course, in dealing with this pandemic. And so when it comes to mental health issues, are we able to learn from the experiences of these other countries, in particular in mental health?
That is a wonderful question. And I've been reaching out to some international colleagues and have been trying to get that information. And it has been very hard to get in touch with people. And so I would love to come back to the committee with more of an update on what's happening around the world as people respond. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. By the way, it was 5 minutes, not 2.5. We go now to Mr. Fisher. Mr. Fisher, you have 5 minutes, if you please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And as usual, I want to thank all of our witnesses today and all of our technical staff for being here and putting up with us for 2 or 3 hours a day. Dr. Liu, this is a quote from your Globe and Mail story. Our healthcare workers are our best and last line of defense in a pandemic. For their sake and ours, we need to protect their physical and mental health. And I thank you for that quote, and I couldn't agree more. There is no doubt that the COVID-19 pandemic is creating mental health challenges for our frontline healthcare workers. And I think about, the healthcare professional needs to think about their own mental and physical health. They need to think about their patients. They need to also think, and I think this gets lost a little bit, they need to think about their families back home. And many that I hear about are self-isolating from their families to protect not only themselves and their patients, but to protect their families. So I guess, Dr. Liu, what measures should we implement to better protect the well-being of our healthcare workers during the pandemic? And what do we perhaps do post COVID-19?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In terms of how to better protect them, I think that the healthcare worker, we already discussed, about the physical protection, and I know that Mr. Mathieu is working on this. So but I think that he heard, the call and the plea. I think that in terms of protecting them and their environment, I think that we haven't given them enough guidance to the healthcare worker or what to do about their family, and giving them as well assistance if they want to isolate themselves elsewhere than their home. And I've been suggesting that could be something that we could decide and suggest and offer if you want to go in a hotel and not go and risk to infect, I don't know, if you have a intergenerational house, your mother was like 75 years old. But those things are not really enacted. I think there's been some initiative in different places, but there's no real guidance about that. And I think that this should be offered because this is one of the things we always did MSF, but it was Ebola. I know it's different, but everybody was put in a hotel, everybody has their room, and everybody was isolated. And this is because the reality why I'm insisting on that is the fact that we don't want them to infect their family, and as well the other way around, we don't want them to be infected by their family. And if they were to be infected by their family, it means that, or if they even only get a cold, they're going to be tested. When you get tested, most of the time you're put aside for 24 to 48 hours until you get the result of your test. And if you get infected, then you're out, for 2 weeks and even more, depending how you pull through the event. So I think there's the physical protection, the mental health protection, as well as I don't think there's enough what we call groupe de parole, people who can ventilate and speak in different hospitals. And I think there should be mental health people from the hospital that should be available as well for the staff and all the staff. And I don't think this is really happening right now in many facilities. I know there's a hotline that you can go, but I don't think people would like to be able to share as well in small group in their hospital. And I think in terms of other extra protection that nobody is addressing is the fact that people, putting their life on the line, and what are we ready to do if they get infected and if the outcome is death? Are we ready, as a country to take responsibility for people who have put their life at risk and went through the ultimate, sacrifice? And then right now, I haven't seen, much conversation on that. I know that when SARS happened in Ontario, it was addressed, but I don't think that there was some real conversation on that, unless I am mistaken, but I haven't been told of anything like this. And I think for on the long term, it's going to be important. And then I'm not an expert, and I think that Mrs. Eaton is much better than me. But most of the time, people can pull through the acute, but the PTSD comes 3 months after, 2 or 3 months. This is my experience in MSF. And so, what are we doing to prevent that? And I think we should be much more proactive to make sure that this will not happen. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, do I still have time? No time.
No, you're slightly over.
Thank you, Dr. Liu.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. We go now to Ms. Jensen. Ms. Jensen, 5 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to everybody for coming out to this meeting today. I want to start with my first question to Dr. Eaton. I heard a really morbid story about 2 farmers who are currently facing bankruptcy, and they were discussing how they could make their suicide look like something else so that their wives would be able to get their life insurance. And then I heard the Prime Minister come out and announce that these restrictions will not be lifted until there's a vaccine available. And my heart sunk because there are many people facing such an incredible dark moment right now. And it seems like this message of we need to wait for a vaccine might be, this straw that breaks the camel's back. Do you think that this sort of messaging poses a danger for those that are struggling with the current restrictions, like the idea that there's really no light at the end of the tunnel? I don't think that they're going to phone a hotline either, as Dr. Liu had mentioned.
Right. It is a dark time for many people. And I think that is one of the things that's most difficult is we don't know when it will end. And that is one of the things that really contributes to people's anxiety right now. And there can be that feeling of hopelessness. And I'm so sorry to hear about the two farmers.
Yeah, I just wonder, do you think that the government could come with more of a light at the end of the tunnel type of a message, perhaps, than what we are getting right now?
Right. I think it's interesting. There has to be, I believe, a balanced response where you have to say that, you don't know what the end might be, but at the same time, reassure people that that there is that we will get through it and that we will get through it together.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That's the balance.
I appreciate that. My next question is for Mr. Matthews. You said a few things that I found very interesting. In my previous life, I used to be involved in overseas procurement. And one thing we always had was boots on the ground wherever we were getting our product during manufacturing times, especially because as you can tell, when demand is high, sometimes it shifts to a factory that you're not aware of, even though you're working with a known factory. So I'm just wondering, why would PSPC not have its own boots on the ground? Why would you be leaving that in the hands of the manufacturers? Why? Because otherwise you wait till it gets here to Canada to find out what something's gone wrong.
So I think it's a bit of a mixed answer, Mr. Chair. So PSPC, largely based in Canada, and our traditional procurement, we would be dealing with a Canadian supplier who would be our interface with the manufacturer. But as the member notes, she's got a background in procurement, and in times of high demand, you have to take a different approach. So the approach we have used in terms of boots on the ground is to work through our embassy, number one. So we do have people on the ground in China. And then
are they healthcare professionals? Will they understand the quality level that you're looking for? Can they go to those factories and actually look as it's being manufactured and do the checks rather than doing them here in Canada?
So if I could, partly yes. So we get the embassy, but then we've also supplemented them with some third-party expertise who does have that kind of expertise. And so on the ground in China, we are doing a few forms of vetting. Number one is vetting the company, the manufacturing facility itself, just in general. And understanding which manufacturers in China are able to export easily and which ones are not, which ones are medical grade, very important. And then we've made some adjustments on the fly, as I mentioned, to actually receive product on the ground. There's a quick inspection done in most cases. There are some types of equipment, N95 masks is a great example, where you actually need a machine to do a test.
And is that machine, can you bring it to the factory, or is it absolutely only able to be done in Canada? Because we often would get samples and then you check the samples.
So we are doing the testing in Canada now. When we started this, we were doing it elsewhere. So the testing is done in Canada and we're testing batches. But not in China then? The testing on the N95 masks right now is not being done, Mr. Chair, in China. We are looking at ways to accelerate the testing to improve quality, but
okay.
The feedback
I do have one more question. Sorry, and I want to get that in my 5 minutes. Sorry. My other question is in regards to, you said you have ongoing orders year after year. And I know back in the day when I was doing sales, we would always do year-to-year comparisons because, of course, in the private sector, if you lose a sale, it doesn't look good on the bottom line. So do you guys have something in place where you're checking year to year? I realize there's no monetary reward for making sure you get, ensure that everybody's buying what they need. But you would maybe have noticed that, some orders were being missed if you had that year to year comparison, like a 5-year comparison, perhaps.
Well, I think the circumstances we're in, Mr. Chair, year to year right now is, I don't want to say meaningless, but we are in a world where the volume is just so far above what we're used to. And we're dealing with companies that we've never had to deal with before. So
Right, exactly. But in the job that I used to do, you would always kind of look to, well, where are the sales? Where have they been in the past, so that you could ensure that those people that do have stockpiles would be actually maintaining those as things were beginning to expire, and just to maximize what's out there.
So obviously vendors' performance track record very important to us. So we did kind of reach out to the existing relationships we had, grab those off the shelves, and then performance is critical. So maybe I'll stop there, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Jansen. Monsieur Thériault,
Mr. Thériault, you have the floor. You have 2.5 minutes. Sorry.
I apologize. I just apologize. Dr. Jaczek, it is to you, and you have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank all the witnesses who we've heard from today, and perhaps at this rather depressing time in Ontario, we're at the peak of the first wave, hearing from CMHA and Ms. Eaton has been particularly important. And I'm just going to take a leaf out of my colleague Tony Van Bynen's book to perhaps inject a little optimism with a quote from Harriet Beecher Stowe. Never give up, for that is just the place and time that the tide will turn. So hopefully people will be able to see some light at the end of the tunnel. And thank you so much to CMHA for all you've been doing. And with the new health web portal that was announced by Minister Haidu today, of course, we know you're going to continue to do some very good work. Now, my question is for Dr. Liu. And Dr. Liu, at this committee, we've been hearing quite a bit about the role of the federal government vis-a-vis the provinces, who, of course, have the major role in healthcare delivery in our country, and even the role of local health authorities. And the federal government has been issuing national guidelines on a number of different subjects related to use of PPE and also for care in long-term care facilities that was issued by the Minister of Seniors federally. So I'd like your opinion as to how the current situation is working in terms of what, of course, we hope is a very collaborative approach, but would you see the need for perhaps the federal level going beyond guidelines in a pandemic situation?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's a tricky question, and it's a good question. And I think that we've been facing that regularly, but not at the extent. And I think that to a certain extent, to just make it short, I think that in times of a pandemic where everybody is facing scarcity of resources, there should be an enhanced role from the government, the federal move at the federal level, because they are the one who got the helicopter view, and everybody else got their provincial view. And so I think there is some real added value in that respect, and that is something that, for example, if you look at the supply of ventilator, like on the expert panel, they say we have that many ventilator. He said, how are we going to redistribute the extra 50,000 ventilator that the federal has? But who has the helicopter view? It's at more at the federal level than at the provincial level, and then can try to make a sort of an equitable redistribution that is that is responding to needs. And then because there is this thing about it seems to be chacun pour soi, each for oneself. But the thing is we need to accept that there might be some places, like if we were to have a scenario like New York in, let's say, Quebec, I do hope that people would chip in, and then we know we've seen it recently that we've got help from the West. So, but the thing is, this needs to happen, and then I wonder, with an enhanced role for the federal to always have this helicopter view, and then help, to the redistribution in a collegial way might be helpful. But I know that is a very, very slippery slope, knowing that most of what is happening is at provincial level.
So you've mentioned provision of personal protective equipment. Are there other areas? There have been suggestions that data collection has been varied. People are not using the same methodology in terms of use of tests. Even you mentioned in your opening statement how healthcare workers should be tested on a regular basis if they're working with COVID-19 patients. Do you see other areas beyond PPE as being something where there should be an enhanced role for the federal government during a pandemic?
Well, I think it's at large, it's about resources and then making sure that if we are a country and we are facing adversity, that we can come as well as a country to help each other and then to enact it when it happens. And then I think that it should be as well in terms of human resources and competences and in terms of, yes, there should be harmonization of data collecting that we are and having the same case definition for things. There's for me a real role to have harmonization of how we do things without being, I would say, a dictatorship. But it should happen because we could speak the same language and therefore get a much more clearer view of what is going on across the country and help each other. I do hope that solidarity should kick in, between provinces and territories.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Nous allons maintenant
And now we'll move on to Ms. Vignola. Ms. Vignola, you have 2.5 minutes, please. I have questions for Ms. Liu and Mr. Eaton, but I only have 2.5 minutes. You mentioned that you were receiving hand sanitizers from Fluid Energy. Fluid Energy, where are they getting their resources? Are they themselves producing these products, or are they getting their resources from elsewhere? Thank you for your question. When it comes to Fluid Energy, the company produced hand sanitizers themselves. Great. Well, I know that there are many distilleries in Quebec and in Canada that were changing their production for different hand sanitizers. That's what I wanted to know. I wanted to know if they were creating their own at Fluid Energy. And I know that across the world, there are problems with procurement when it comes to reactives for the tests. What is that reactive agent? And are there alternative reactive agents that be just as good, just as reliable and safe when it comes to results? And finally, would we be able to create this reactive agent ourselves? Do we have the necessary infrastructure to do so?
I'm going to have to respond to in English. It's a little technical for me. So reagent is a chemical necessary for the traditional testing. Main source has been out of one company in the past, and there's a global shortage, as the member mentioned, Mr. Chair. So we are now using companies in Canada to manufacture reagent to fill the gap. And that comes with its own challenges. There's a certain kind of chemical called guanidine that is a little challenging to procure, but we've bought some already, we're buying more. So we are well on the way to making our own reagent here in Canada to fill in the gap because of the global shortage.
I've lost interpretation from Ms. Vignola. Interpretation. I've lost interpretation for Ms. Vignola. How's everyone else doing?
It's no mic at all. It's not in French either.
Welcome
Vignola,
to my world.
Ms. Vignola, nobody can hear you. Can you check your mic, please? Something changed because when you started, you were perfectly okay. Can you make sure you're speaking into your microphone? I see you have a headset. Yes, please. Try that. Speak. Nothing. Let us suspend briefly while we sort this out, please. Fignola, please start your most recent question again.
So, Ms. Liu, Ms. Eaton, in your testimony at the beginning of your testimony, I heard a cry for help. You were sounding the alarm. And in Canada, what have territories, Quebec, and other provinces, what can we all do to help appease your worries at the moment? Because we know that to be able to take care of others, we must first take care of ourselves. So this is a main concern for healthcare workers. They have to feel safe and protected to help others. So what can we do concretely to help them?
Thank you for that question. How do we help each other? I think it's very important to think about the landscape of mental health in Canada. And we know that mental health has not been funded to the same extent as physical health has been, that there is parity. The Mental Health Commission of Canada recommends that the health budget, 9% of the health budget go towards mental health, and currently it's only about 7%. And while there have been big increases from the federal government in the last few years, we're feeling the pinch from that. And more Canadians are identifying that anxiety and depression are at almost pandemic levels amongst Canadians. And so adding that additional pressure of the pandemic has just increased those needs by so many fold. So we are sounding the alarm that more needs to be done, that there needs to be more of an investment at all levels of mental health to ensure that the gaps that already exist can be closed and that new needs can be met. So, I urge the government to think about keeping in touch. Please, speak with your key partners like CMHA to actually to help us help you as we go through this pandemic together, to look for the kinds of reactions that we're going to have to make, the investments, the choices we're going to have to make over the next year and the next 2 years potentially.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Ms. Vignola.
Mr. Davies, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Matthews, about 2 months ago, members from all parties on this committee expressed great concerns about the number of ventilators in Canada. At that time, we estimated that we had about 5,000 ventilators across the country. And of course, we were all struck with the tragic images of doctors in Italy and other places having to make terrible decisions about which patient or that got access to a limited ventilator. So I'm grateful to hear in your statement that there's been orders placed for more than 30,000 ventilators from various companies, including some Canadian ones. We expressed concerns about this a couple months ago. I'm wondering if you can give us a timeline, at least in specific as you can, of when we might start seeing those ventilators actually received and put to use in Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the member has touched on a very important issue in terms of his question. Ventilators are in short supply worldwide. They're not sitting around on shelves. We are going to see ventilators start arriving in small numbers the next couple of weeks, and then ramping up through May. But I think the key to the Canadian strategy on ventilators is the domestic capacity. So we've recently put in place 3 contracts with 3 different companies in Canada. One's a consortium, but to build 10,000 ventilators each. And this is a speed buy. We want them up and running very, very quickly because the need is rather urgent. So that's the real end game here. While we wait for those other ones to get delivered, get the domestic capacity up and running because it's an important shortage.
Mr. Matthews, through the chair, may I ask you to provide updates to the committee on your receipt and deployment of ventilators over the next few weeks and months? I'm wondering if that's something you could do that would be helpful to keep us apprised of our progress in that.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'm happy to provide the committee with updates of receipt, and then distribution, I would encourage, that's got to go to the Public Health Agency of Canada because they would be the ones who would then distribute out to provinces.
Thank you. And my final question to you, Dr. Liu. I know you've seen a lot of pandemics around the world, and yesterday BC's provincial health officer expressed concern about a COVID-19 outbreak at BC's Mission Institution, which is a minimum security federal correctional facility where 41 people have tested positive for the disease and 7 are being treated in hospital. According to data released over the weekend, over 100 inmates and corrections officers working at Canadian federal institutions have tested positive for COVID-19. I'm wondering if, through your experience working around the globe, if you have any advice to give this committee about how we might best handle COVID-19 among populations like inmates who are obviously in extraordinary, exceptional positions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is a very good question, and we are actually tackling it right now because we are working as well in detention center in different countries. And the reality is the only thing that we are working on is to reduce this physical distinction that we are trying to enact as much as we can. And then it means that we keep everyone in their cell, and there's no more community, I would say, room, like having meals together or going. So it's a completely different sort of routine that we have to put it in, but this is the only thing we've done that we can do to prevent. And then for inmates who are infected, then we need to care for them and put them in a separate section of the place. And so it's I don't think that detention center are trained to address that, and I think they're going to need extra I would say human resources and public health and IPC, infection prevention control, to make them be able to address the issue. But that certainly is a very, very, very good point, and it should be absolutely answered.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Thank you, everyone. That wraps up our third round. I'd like to thank all of the members of our panel for their sharing their time with us today and all of their great information. And thank you for having such great answers to our questions. And thanks to all the members, and certainly as well thanks to the House of Commons staff and technical people for, as we are all mutually bearing through working through the glitches, we're getting there, and we'll get there all together. So thank you, everybody, and the meeting is now adjourned.